Hello, hello! Welcome back to Brenda's Books. Thank you for coming back to listen to more of Queen Andraya. If you would like to follow Brenda's Books online, I am on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Here is Chapter 20 of Queen Andraya. Here we go. Chapter 20, Precious Pants. My queen, would you do me the honor of joining me for dinner? Andraya let out a hearty laugh. Dolion could be so obtuse it was comical. A real live walking contradiction, without even realizing it. She turned to the rest of the group. Please excuse me, I need to talk to my chancellor in private. Caleen appeared completely passive as usual, but both Martin and Steffan held a disgruntled expression. Andraya stepped around the wooden bench, and she and Dolion took a few steps down the dirt path, away from the others. Do you remember our conversation in my office this morning, Chancellor? Very well, he answered, halting to face her directly. He did not carry his usual scowl. He almost looked happy. How odd. And do you remember when I told you that we would not discuss this subject further? Dolion folded his arms. What subject is that? The subject of you and I. Dolion's scowl returned. I thought you would be through being upset. Regardless of whether or not I am upset, Chancellor, I am through with you pretending to have an interest in me. Dolion let out a breathless laugh as he glanced away for a moment before returning his gaze to hers. But I do. Andraya smirked. Only because you want to be king and have my job. Andraya expected him to burst out with something like, Of course I do! You are incapable and I would be doing you a favor. But instead, he shook his head slightly and murmured, Not true. Andraya scrutinized him to make sure he was serious. He was. At least, she thought he was. Are you retracting all of those things you said to me this morning, and in your letter, and in the council room? Andraya suggested. Dolion heaved a sigh. It would help if I knew what things you were referring to, madam. Andraya rolled her eyes. How could a man so intelligent be so daft? Never mind, Chancellor. I will join you for dinner as long as the rest of my group joins us as well. Dolion's eyes bulged. But why? They did not extend the invitation to you. I did. And now I am extending the invitation to them, Andraya said in a sweet, leering voice. Dolion scowled like he had never scowled before. The queen turned to the others and called, Let us all dine together this evening, shall we? Steffan and Martin both gave a reluctant nod. Caleen looked terrified. Oh, the painting supplies, Andraya muttered to herself. I will ask my footman to fetch them when we get inside, said Dolion. Your lady-in-waiting cannot carry all of that. Well, at least he was observant of something, Andraya thought. The four of them walked along the dirt paths in utter silence, as they weaved in and out of the various shrubbery and slender birch trees. Andraya's legs ached and her head grew dizzy. Dr. Mason had warned her this would happen if she exerted herself too soon after being so ill. She wanted to grab Steffan's arm and lean on him, but she did not think it wise to show him that kind of preference just yet. So instead, she hooked elbows with Caleen and leaned on her. Are you feeling faint, Your Majesty? Steffan asked. To the Queen's surprise, he was holding the painting supplies against his chest again. Yes, Andraya admitted. Dolion bounced his gaze between them. Why should she be feeling faint? Because someone in the palace poisoned her not too long ago, Steffan alluded. What? Martin cried. Is this true, Your Majesty? Yes, Andraya said flatly. But why? What? How is this possible? Martin stammered. No one seemed to want to answer him. Well, you may lean on me, my queen, Martin offered. Dolion glowered. Caleen's arm will suffice, said the queen, leaning on her some more. Once the group's feet treaded loudly up the stone steps, Caleen whispered, Must I dine with all of you? I will feel terribly uncomfortable. Plus, I promised Cook I would help serve dinner tonight." "Well, if you promised Cook, then you should do that," Andraya whispered back. "Oh, thank you." Caleen breathed out a sigh of relief. Alvin opened the large double doors for them and bowed as they passed. "Good evening, Alvin," said the Queen. "Good evening, Your Majesty." With this encounter, Andraya saw Dolion eyeing her with curiosity. Alvin relieved Steffan of his load, and Hudson set down the stools which he had carried. Caleen made a show of curtsying to Andraya and said, "If there is nothing else, Your Majesty." "No, thank you, Caleen. You did a fine job on your painting." Caleen smiled through her blush, then scurried down the marble hallway. The Queen led the others past the sitting room, past the stairs, and into the living space, where the high vaulted ceilings reached to the 4th floor, and the massive stone fireplace stretched the length of it, displaying the bold colors of the Chaldean flag. She turned a sharp corner to the right, where Benjamin stood waiting in front of a new set of double doors. He bowed when he saw her approach. "Your Majesty." He opened the doors and stood by, while the 5 of them, including Hudson, passed through the threshold. They entered a rather small room, known as the Royal Lounge. Several cushioned sofas and chairs furnished the space, with a thick bookcase on the back wall. Andraya smiled at the sight of it. "Ah, your favorite room, Your Majesty," Dolion announced. "Is it?" "Yes. You used to read here all the time. I do not know why, however, since the library has a great deal more interesting books than this small collection." Andraya did not mention that the reason for this was because Gordon never thought to look for her in here, like he did the library. "Will these 3 be dining with you tonight?" Benjamin asked. "Yes," Andraya said with a smile. "Then I shall have 2 more places set at the table, and inform you when everything is prepared." "Thank you, Benjamin." The world started to spin again, so the Queen promptly sat in a large solitary chair and placed her hands in her lap. Promptly afterward, Dolion, Martin, and Steffan sat in various spots around the room. "Why on earth are you sitting in that chair when there is a gold one over here?" Dolion asked, motioning with his head to the gold-cushioned chair next to him. "Gold is much more fit for a queen." Andraya lifted her eyes to study the small but sparkling chandelier. "I will sit in whichever chair I wish, Chancellor." "But why do you prefer red over gold?" Dolion asked. "Red is my favorite color," Andraya replied. Although this was not the reason she had chosen her velvet chair, it was simply the one closest in proximity. "It is?" the 3 gentlemen asked in unison. Andraya laughed. "Absolutely." Dolion leaned back and stretched one long arm out on the back of the sofa with a brazen smile. "So you did like my roses." The Queen did not look at Steffan or Martin's face, but the aura in the room suddenly grew thick with tension. "Actually, I despise roses, Chancellor," the Queen said, keeping her tone matter-of-fact. Dolion's lips formed into a tight line. "Then why do you have a whole garden of them?" "I did not put the garden there." "Why do you keep it there, then?" Dolion said with disdain. Andraya straightened her posture and crossed her legs. "You may recall, sir, that a false translator tried to scare me away from my responsibilities. Then someone else," she said pointedly, "tried to convince me to abandon my head crown and have me voted out. Then someone in the palace tried to poison me, and I was on my deathbed for 5 days. All things considered, one might deduce that the rose garden has not reached the top of my priorities." Dolion smirked, as if her entire statement were ludicrous. "I still cannot fathom why anyone would want, or dare, to poison such a fine, intelligent, magnificent, glorious person as yourself," Martin exclaimed, dumbfounded. Dolion glared at him with unmistakable irritation. But Steffan sat still, with his elbows on his armrests and his fingers together. He appeared to be studying the Queen again. Then Benjamin re-entered the room. "Everything is arranged, Your Majesty. Who would you like to place in your seat of honor?" "Well, I suppose since the prince is highest in rank, it should be him," the Queen said, hoping this would appease the other 2 and still cause Steffan to feel honored. at least a little. Of course, he may choose otherwise if he wishes." "Your wish is my wish, your majesty," said the prince. "Oh, how magnanimous of you!" Dolion spit sardonically. But Steffan paid him no heed, as his bright blue eyes stayed fixated on the queen. Andraya knew that look would make her blush, so she kept her eyes anywhere but on the prince's face. "And why do you pick him? I am the one who asked to dine with you," Dolion said with contempt. "Contrary to what I told you this morning," the queen snapped. "Ah, you were just upset," Dolion dismissed with a wave of his hand. Andraya felt her blood start to simmer, but she ignored him and got to her feet. "Gentlemen, let us proceed." Benjamin opened the doors for them and bowed as the small group entered the vast dining hall, which was largely empty at the moment. At the corner of the hall, they proceeded through one more set of doors into the private dining room. At the center rested a rectangular table, covered with a stark white tablecloth, sparkling with china plates, along with all the extra and unnecessary, but proper, utensils and glasses. Andraya stood at the head of the table, Steffan stood behind the seat to her right, and Dolion on her left. Martin, who looked fairly glum, stood next to the prince. Benjamin pulled out the queen's chair for her. Once she sat, the others followed suit. 2 footmen hustled out the swinging doors from the kitchen and served each of them a hot meal of roasted chicken and pearled potatoes, with steamed asparagus and a carrot soufflé on the side. Andraya's stomach growled as the delicious smells floated through the air. As soon as she took a bite, the others did the same. Dolion was the fastest to devour his entire plate. Once he did so, he sat straighter in his seat and began to interrogate Prince Steffan. "So, Prince of Deldria," he said, spitting the kingdom's name as if it were a curse word. "Why has your nation decided to join the island coalition? This has not happened in decades." Despite Dolion's blatant dislike for the prince, Steffan's response was as pleasant as ever. It was time to join the rest of the world. We can all learn much from each other. Dolion smirked. "The only thing we can learn from Deldria is what not to do." "I am sorry you see it that way," Steffan said, his pleasant tone still intact. "My nation has a great deal to offer." Dolion scoffed. "Like what? Your abolitionism?" "That is one virtue, yes," the prince said, unruffled. "If that is your reason for joining, your highness, you might as well pack your bags. You will never convince Chaldrea to stop trading with Gulen." Steffan took a sip of his drink, then said, "It turns out I do not have to. Your fine leader already agrees with me." Dolion let out a mocking laugh. "I am afraid that fine leader will have to convince the entire coalition, and I assure you that will not happen." Andraya rolled her eyes, not caring enough to argue as she took another bite of potatoes. Steffan swallowed before saying, "Well, I disagree with you there. I believe she will absolutely make it happen." He flashed Andraya a smile, which she returned. Dolion glowered at the two of them. Then he leaned back in his seat and folded his arms across his chest. He lifted his chin, looking as if an entirely new thought just occurred to him. "It is all coming together now, my queen." "What is that, Chancellor?" Andraya asked, as she pricked at her asparagus. "The reason you take an interest in the Prince of Deldria," he explained. Martin's face reddened at this, but Steffan simply continued chewing and raised his eyebrows as casually as ever as he waited for Dolion to continue. Dolion returned the feigned casual expression. "He is kind, is he not?" he asked, staring right at the prince. "I dare say he is," replied the queen, taking a sip of her wine. Dolion gave Steffan a surly grin. "That is your vice, your highness." Steffan pointed his fork full of potatoes at him. "Is it really?" he said calmly. "Yes," Dolion hissed, reverting back to his hostile demeanor. "It is contrary to what you are trying to do. Giving the queen false hope is not kindness." Andraya's stomach squeezed into knots, but Steffan remained as serene as ever. Dolion leaned forward and spoke in a menacing tone. A real man says it how it is. Steffan leaned forward as well. I could not agree with you more. Just then, the doors from the kitchen swung open, revealing Benjamin and Caleen, both carrying a small platter of desserts. Your Majesty, we have raspberry and blueberry cheesecake. Which would you prefer? Benjamin asked. Raspberry, please. Benjamin placed a plump piece of cake in front of her and spooned a raspberry sauce on it until the Queen told him to stop. Then Benjamin moved to serve the Chancellor, and Caleen moved to serve the Prince. Andraya noticed that Benjamin glanced more at Caleen than he did his serving spoon. Caleen blushed when she dished up Martin's dessert, and Benjamin, who was putting sauce on Dolion's second piece, accidentally knocked it over onto his lap. "Oh, confound it, lad!" Dolion exclaimed, standing abruptly. "Oh, I am so sorry, my lord! I am so sorry!" Benjamin said in haste. He grabbed some napkins and wiped Dolion's black satin pants. "I do not want you to clean me up," he snarled. "Oh, well, I will do it. How about you go fetch some water?" Caleen said to Benjamin. "Yes," he said, as he rushed into the kitchen. Caleen carefully picked raspberries and blueberries off the Chancellor's pants until Benjamin hurried back with a pitcher of water and a rag. Caleen wiped the wet rag over the Chancellor's thighs with a thorough scrub, while Dolion held his hands in the air, as if this would help. "If these pants are ruined, the cost is coming out of your paycheck, lad," Dolion sneered. "Oh, please, Chancellor, I will pay for your precious pants," Andraya said. "Why should you? He's the one who ruined them," Dolion said, bobbing a bit from Caleen's scrubbing. "Those pants cost more than 6 months of his pay. I will buy you new ones if need be, but I am certain Caleen can get the stain out. She is a miracle worker." Dolion stared down at Caleen, as if her brushing hands would confirm this. "All right, let me go change." Caleen stood and moved to let him pass. "I apologize again, my lord," said Benjamin, his cheeks as ruddy as ever. Dolion grunted and exited the dining room with an aggressive thrust of the door. "I am so sorry the Chancellor got so cross with you, Benjamin," said Andraya. "Are you all right?" "I am fine," he said, but he was staring at Caleen again, who was listening to Martin spout something to her about her painting. Then Martin glanced up. "Oh, your Majesty! Since that wretched man is finally gone, and I am your new treasurer, which you rightly gave me the honor of being, did you know that I received my certificate of finance from—" "I am aware of your credentials, my lord. What is it you need to tell me?" Andraya interjected. "I must tell you about some discrepancies I found with some funds with the Griffin port." "Oh, shall I wait until the prince is also gone?" "No need for that. What discrepancies?" "Well, the port makes X amount of seons, but after summing up all the different places those funds flow to, it does not add up to be the same amount." "So you think someone is taking extra funds for themselves and not recording it?" the Queen clarified. "Yes, your Majesty. It could even be more than one person." "Do you have enemies in the palace, your Majesty?" Martin asked. Andraya clunked her fork onto her plate and leaned back in her chair. "I am afraid, my lord, that I have several, and I believe it is time to find out who they are." She turned to Steffan. "Will you help me?" And that concludes Chapter 20. Thanks for listening. I hope you come back next Thursday for Chapter 21 of Queen Andraya. If you want to find out more about Brenda's books, you can visit brendasbooks.net. Until next time, take care.